Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
All right, welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs here with Ben Staten.
Yo.
And I think tonight's show is going to be a fun one. We're going to do player comps and player comps for players currently in the league. We're not doing like all-time great GOAT debate type player comps that lead us down these wormholes that are inescapable, that ruin relationships, make Thanksgiving and Christmas completely untenable. We're going to stick to players who are currently in the league, but I do think it's going to be fun because we have some really interesting comps. We've got Luka and Shai, which I think is a really, really, really kind of budding rivalry in the Western Conference. We'll get into it a little bit. I don't know how much of it's a for the sake of this episode, we'll call it a budding rivalry. I'll swallow my pride and just call it a budding rivalry, and we'll get deeper into that in a little while. We're going to talk about AD and Wemby, which is, I would argue the two best defensive centers in the NBA. We're going to talk about the best young big in the NBA that's not named Wemby, which may tip our hand a little bit as to how that AD Wemby debate goes. We're also going to talk about Jokic and Giannis, who are really the best two players of the post-Steph KD Warriors era. And then I think kind of the shiny new Camaro, the sexiest comp of them all is the Anthony Edwards versus Ja Morant comp. That's going to be a fun one. And then last but not least is Tatum versus LeBron. And I think it's important, that we just state up front that we're talking about as they are today. We're not talking about is Tatum higher on the all-time list of players than LeBron. We're talking about as they are today. So I think this is going to be a really fun episode, and I'm going to just kick it over to you and let you get started with Shai and Luka.
So our first player comparison, it's basically a battle for who is the best point guard in the league, between Luka Doncic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And, I think it's important to start off by saying these are probably easily two of the top 10, arguably two of the top 5 players in the league. Both of them are fantastic. There's a, pretty clear line of demarcation between them and any other point guard in the league. Maybe Jalen Brunson is, in that discussion as well. But when comparing them, I think the best way to start off is basically to look at what does Shai bring to the table. And, to start off with, I think the Thunder offense is perfectly tailored to take advantage of Shai's skill set. But by that I mean that, they run a 5-out offense. Shai is, in my opinion, the best mid-range shooter in the NBA. Point blank. And the 5-out offense gives Shai these acres of space to operate in. And he is able to get to his shot. He is really, really, really good at pushing off at times, creating some space. And he can hit his mid-range jumper, contested, hand in his face. He hits that seemingly at a 60 to 70% clip. When you compare that to Luka does, the mid-range isn't as so much of his game, but his step-back three-pointer is kind of the comparison point to Shai's mid-range game. He has the most deadly step-back game in NBA history, point blank. It terrifies defenses. You can hear Paul George talk about in his podcast about how it's literally impossible to defend. But what he brings to the table, in my opinion, that Shai doesn't have is Shai creates points for himself. And, he does get 6 or 7 assists a game. I'm not trying to say he's a ball hog. But Luka fundamentally destabilizes defenses in a way that Shai does not. Part of it is because he actually takes a lot more. He's a lot more methodical about how he does. Shai is very fast and very quick, gets to his spot and shoots. Luka will burn 5-6 seconds getting from the 3-point line to the top of the key or the paint, and pushing his defender back. And as a result of that, defenses will start to shift, and he'll wait, try to draw out a defender, and you saw this in the Thunder series, he waited until Holmgren committed to come out. And then moment he saw that, he immediately he'd do the pass, he'd throw an alley-oop, he'd get there. But he's able to create and to create for his teammates and to stabilize defenses in a way you just don't see Shai do. And I think that was really, honestly, one of the biggest, differentiators in that series. Shai got his points against the Mavericks, but the rest of his team just flat out struggle offensively. And yeah.
Luka is I don't think there's been a single season where Shai outpaced Luka in scoring.
Nope.
I don't think there's been a single season where Shai outpaced Luka in assists.
Nope.
And I don't think there's been a single season where Shai outpaced Luka in rebounding. Luka's actually a great rebounding guard.
Yeah. And so, I think that while we're talking about two fantastic players, there's just some extra elements. Luka, I can't imagine defending him because he is sort of like a black hole in that the moment, he moves so methodically and there's just literally no way to stop him from getting to his spots on the court, that entire defenses have to completely react and collapse to prevent him because they know that he does that and he can score and play make at an absolute elite level. And so, he can single-handedly generate 80 points of offense in a game in a way that I don't think Shai ever will be able to hit.
Yeah. I think you have to talk about the comparison between Shai and Luka has to be done in the order that you did it, starting with Shai, because Shai is a really, 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 really good player.
Yep.
But in terms of talking about them being on the first tier, the only way to really understand how good Luka is to set the table by building Shai up and then demonstrating how much better Luka is than Shai. Because, everybody likes the Chrysler 300 until a Phantom pulls up. And, I think that Shai, one of the things that, like, Shai's ability to get to his spot,
yes,
is phenomenal. And once he gets to that spot, he's automatic.
Yes.
You have to be very physical with Shai. And get him out of his rhythm to disrupt that shot. I've not seen very many defenders who can do it.
Nope.
The thing about and Shai's very he's very smooth. For example, when Shai's on his left hand and he wants to get to his right, particularly when he's out around the 3-point line. He has a move very similar to that Schroeder move where Schroeder looks like he's going to turn out from the baseline and go back out, and then he just does a full spin and ducks in real quick to get the layup. Shai has a similar move that he turns into a, between change of direction and he gets to that elbow jumper. It's very smooth. You don't see it coming. It looks like he's literally about to back out, like he's about to start back dribbling. And then suddenly he's between his legs. He's got the angle on you. He gets the step. I've been one of the people who have frequently said that Shai does a shove.
Yes.
What I noticed in watching film on Shai this weekend, and me and my son were kind of going over this, is because I was wanting him to see how Shai uses his off arm to create space.
Yeah.
A lot of the time what Shai is doing is he's getting his off arm up to protect himself. He's using his leg to create the space. He's driving his leg across the defender's legs into their thigh and forcing them out of their path to create that space. But because his off arm is up, it looks like a shove when in reality his leg took their path from them is what he did. And it's a very effective move because he uses that jab step to set up the shot. So he's jabbing straight into their path to create the space, and then the jab step simultaneously sets up the shot, and he jumps from that spot. It's incredibly effective. one of the flaws, in my opinion, of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Shai masks it very well, is that they are playing a 5-out offense, and it creates, as you said, acres and acres of space. And for an ISO basketball player of Shai's caliber, that amount of space he's going to exploit every time.
Yeah.
The problem is OKC doesn't have someone else that's capable of doing that from an ISO position, particularly in the playoffs when teams have schemes in place to prevent it, as effectively as Shai can. If you had one more guy who could do that, one of the reasons I consider Dallas to be a superior team is obviously Luka's capable of doing that. Kyrie Irving is more than capable of doing that. And so you just have two players who are capable of creating their own shot at any given point. And quite frankly, there aren't a lot of defensive schemes that can completely shut them down.
No.
And so one of the reasons I don't think you've ever seen OKC, and like there are variations of the roster. Last year was the first year in the playoffs we saw it with Chet. But even with Chet out there, and you know, we saw it the year before with Jalen Williams. Even with Chet out there last year, Jalen Williams struggled to create his own shot.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, obviously Jalen Williams is a good young player and you hope to continue to see that development, but it's not there yet. And I don't think there's any time soon where it's going to be on the level of Kyrie. But going back to Shai, I mean, when you talk about Shai, like his ability to get to his spot on the floor and create his own shot, like no questions about it. The problem is it's when you start to compare him with Luka, it's not just about his ability to get to his spot on the floor and create his own shot. It's about his ability to get to his spot on the floor, break down the defense, and create shots for others.
That's exactly it.
And Luka has an ability to, when you watch Luka at the perimeter, Luka's counting the seconds on that big.
Yep.
Like when that big steps out of the paint or is about to have to step out of the paint, that's when Luka's going to often, not always, begin his attack. He's going to have the big in the most compromised position. People talk about how Luka, like they talk about him as though he's not athletic. All right. I have no idea what Luka's 40 time is. I don't know what his vertical is. I don't think any of that really matters that much because we're not asking him to win races or high jumps. And so when you look at Luka's athleticism, I would venture to guess he has some of the quickest, most coordinated feet in the NBA. His ability to change directions, like his attacking angles. He's so big, he's so strong, he's long. He's not worried about you picking his pocket. He attacks your hip. He drives you off that spot, forces you to begin to turn your hips. And the moment you do, to recover and regain your balance, he changes directions. And once somebody that size has that kind of step on you, you're out of the play. Once he's got his inside foot outside of your outside foot, he uses his size to lock you out of the play. And he timed this entire movement based on when the big would be in the most compromised position.
Yep.
He gets to his spot on the floor, and then he turns it into a choose-your-own-adventure video game for the defender. He lets them decide whether they're going to give him the layup or whether they're going to give a teammate of his a lob or whether they're going to give a teammate of his an open corner three. And Luka's such a creative passer that it's very difficult to take passing lanes away from him.
Yep.
Balls arrive on target and often traveling about 30 miles an hour. So when those shooters catch those balls, the closeout is nowhere near them yet. They're shooting truly uncontested three-pointers, which is part of the reason why when a guy signs a minimum contract in Dallas or a guy comes from the second unit in Charlotte, and I'm not diminishing PJ Washington's talent. Like, I think PJ Washington is a really good NBA player. But PJ Washington came from Charlotte where he was playing he was a role player.
Yep.
And he showed up in Dallas and became a pivotal part of them reaching the finals. And it's because when you go back and you account for the points that PJ Washington's getting in the playoffs, what you will notice is Luka Doncic has put him in a position where he is supremely advantaged against whoever is guarding him. This person is so far out of position because they're helping own Luka.
Yep.
That PJ Washington is either shooting a wide open corner three or the closeout is there just in time for PJ Washington to pump fake, attack the closeout, get the easy push shot at the rim.
Yep.
Luka Doncic has an ability to not just get to his spot on the floor and create for himself. He has an ability to get to his spot on the floor and create for every other player on his team to such a degree that you're talking about a guy who turns B players into A players, C players into B players. It's a full letter grade elevation. I think that Shai makes the players around him better because defenses have to concern themselves with Shai. But I think you're absolutely right in that in a playoff series, teams are basically saying, if we'll put our best defender on Shai. We'll have that player give Shai hell. We'll try to make Shai play defense. We'll try to make Shai work for every bucket he gets, but he's getting one defender. Go back and watch the Dallas series. He's getting one defender. And the thing you got to remember is Dallas doesn't have the type of defender like a Lou Dort or a Drew Holiday, where you can commit one defender to a premier scorer, and that single defender truly does make it like you're burning an awful lot of damn calories to get these buckets, right?
Yep.
Dallas didn't have that kind of defender.
Nope.
They put Derrick Jones Jr. on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they just told him, do your best. And his best, which I thought was admirable, was not good enough to keep Shai from getting 30 a game. But Dallas knew, long as Shai's getting a tough 30 a game, we'll live with it. Because what we're going to do is we're going to commit ourselves to making sure Jalen Williams doesn't beat us, Chet Holmgren doesn't beat us, Josh Giddey doesn't beat us, Isaiah Joe doesn't beat us. Like, they took everybody else away. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, while he is a better he's not a bad playmaker. It's just the gulf that separates him and Luka Doncic as a playmaker is so incredibly great. And I'd also say as a three-point shooter, is so incredibly great that it's difficult to put those two players in the same tier.
100%. I think you summarized it perfectly. All right. So now to our second one, our second comparison, which is Anthony Davis versus Wemby. Do you want us to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Like, in fact, I almost just want to state a rule. Like, obviously, this discussion doesn't include futures, right?
100%.
Like, it's interesting. Like, even hearkening back to the Luka Shai comparison, they came in the league, I think, in the same draft, if I remember correctly. And
I believe so.
Yeah, they're right around each other. Shai's a year older than Luka. Shai has, I believe, one first-team All-NBA.
Yes. Well, you remember he got held out a bunch of times when they were tanking, and they would just send him out the second half of the year.
Yeah.
Uh, but let me see.
I think Shai has one first team All NBA. And there might be circumstances surrounding that, such
Got
as what
two.
you're describing.
He's
He
got
has
two.
two. So two first team All NBAs. Luka comes in, wins Rookie of the Year, and then is just first team All NBA every year after that. Like there are just levels to it, right? Luka's taken two teams to the Western Conference Finals and once to the finals. If I'm taking the futures on Luka and Shai,
Same draft, by the way.
yeah, if I'm taking the futures on Luka and Shai, it's crazy because like presently I'm still taking Luka. I think Luka is just a better player and has been at every stage of their co-emerging careers. But looking into the future, I still don't think you've hit peak Luka Doncic yet, and I think Luka Doncic is going to continue to improve and reach levels that Shai never does. So when you look over at Wemby and AD, and we start talking about futures, I mean, I don't even think there's a conversation.
One of them's like 32, and the other one's 20. It's like we're that's
Yeah,
what we're
yeah,
doing. You can't. You otherwise we'd be having completely different debates, and it would be hard to compare LeBron to anyone. It's like, well, he'll be retiring. He'll be reaching ARP age in a couple of years. So
yeah, 100%. So like I'm talking about like taking them right now. But once again, like the interesting thing about this conversation is that in order to talk about like how good Wemby is, like freakishly good too, like shit you just ain't ever seen before, weird shit. Like I think the alien logo is so apt because he is from another planet. Like it's so important to understand. Like I'm taking AD right now over Wemby. I think there's just a component of experience and knowledge. I think there's an element of not just emotional and mental maturity, but physical maturity. And none of this is just to be clear, none of this is a slight at Wemby saying he's like emotionally immature. I'm just saying he's 19. Like there's just shit that you're just 19 and there's just nothing you can do about being 19 until you're 20. Like and you just grow. And like I think he's actually advanced in that respect, well beyond his years too. But there's an element of experience and emotional maturity, but also physical maturity. Like AD has grown into his body. There is a strength to AD that Wemby does not yet have. And I mean, dude, I was like block percentage, like percentage of shots taken that AD blocks, but percentage of shots taken that AD blocks from the opposing team. It's like 5.5% or something, which is a remarkable number. Like if you just stop and think about like 5.5% of every shot that an opponent takes, AD gets his mitten on it. And it's like, wow,
he's
that's
talking about half the shots in his vicinity because like
yeah,
a lot of the shots not going to be taken near him. So obviously you can't block them. That means like he's blocking shots taken near him.
Yeah, I mean it's a remarkable number. Fucking Wemby is 10%. It is astonishing what that dude is able to do on the defensive end of the floor, right? The only reason I'm taking AD is I think AD's offensive game is significantly more mature than Wemby's, to the point to where you're talking about all NBA level player, like one of the top two or three bigs in the league. And while I think Wemby is a better defensive player already than Anthony Davis, I think Anthony Davis is a good enough defensive player that I'm not that worried about. Like I'm not losing anything on defense by having Anthony Davis on my team. Is my point. But it speaks to how good Wemby is that this is even a conversation. There is no other position no rookie point guard, no rookie shooting guard, no rookie any damn thing. Anthony Edwards rookie year, nobody was looking at him and saying he's the best two guard in the league. Like we're having legitimate conversations about whether you would take Wemby or AD this year.
Yeah.
It's astonishing how good Wemby is.
No, and it's a legitimate. It's a legitimate conversation, to be really clear. I think I agree with you completely. I think Wemby is like in a tier of his own already as the best defensive player in the world. I think I think that he is by blocks per game the best shot blocker in the league. But I think if you watch Spurs game, his deterrent ability is. I mean, he's just so intimidating. Even an AD, who himself is also one of the best shot blockers in the league. Wemby deters about 3 or 4 times as many shots as he blocks because players just won't take them if he's within a 10-foot radius.
Yeah,
and the other thing about him, I think when you're comparing their offensive games, you have it's basically, do you value a more expansive offensive game, doing more things, more ability off the dribble, but less polished, or a more restrictive offensive game in AD doesn't have anywhere near the handle or the sort of perimeter shooting that Wemby has, but much more polished. Like his post game is significantly stronger. I would say his ability to bully defenders is. I mean, Wemby really can't do that at this point. Yeah, I mean, if he can just sort of reach over you, he's very capable of that. But even the Dylan Brookses of the world can hold their own a little bit against him because they just are physically stronger at this point. Now he's gained 25 pounds of muscle and looks stronger. That may change this next year, but that was kind of one of his Achilles heels as a rookie. And also Wemby, last year there was a lot of stuff he was just trying to figure out. Like he would try things that would sort of backfire spectacular just to see if he could do it. Like, you were good for 1 or 2 just weird air balls a game from him just being like, how will this shot work right here? And then he later it. And that will just go away as he matures.
Well, and I mean, and like to put a little context on like part of my decision with why I would take AD over Wemby right now. Like, and I think this is a really good example of the difference between this discussion and the futures discussion. Perimeter shooting.
Yep.
The truth is, I don't want either one of them shooting a bunch of threes. like he shoots it better than Anthony Davis, but really that's more of an indictment of Anthony Davis's 3-point shooting at this stage because Wemby's only shooting at 32%. Like I'm more like, so like this year, especially like if I'm on a team like the Lakers who have some aspirations versus the Spurs who are clearly in a rebuild. Like I'm erring on the side of player development with Wemby. I want him to get a handle on all this stuff. I want him to figure out what it takes to dribble and take on defenders at his size. I want him to get a feel for that step back 3. I don't want Anthony Davis doing any of that shit. And I don't have to worry about him really doing any of that stuff. If I remember correctly, we started off last season with Darvin Ham saying something like he wants AD to shoot like 8 threes a game or something like that. AD never went out there shooting 8 threes a game. He never even tried it. I imagine Anthony Davis
take 8 threes. You shoot them every time. Yeah.
I imagine Anthony Davis reacted to that comment the same way we all did.
Like what?
But you see my point. Like in this 100%. Context, like this year, I'm going to get more production of AD playing his game than Wemby playing the development game.
The separator for them and why I would choose Wemby actually comes from Wemby's passing ability. I think that Wemby is going to be. He's not going to be Jokic, but he has the potential to be an 8 assist a game guy in the NBA. He likes the pass. That is something, the reality about Wemby is Wemby in his ideal world would probably be something of a point guard.
And just to be clear, you're saying you would take Wemby
right now, yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I think it's really, really tight, and I do actually think that it really is situational. Like if I was the Lakers, I would pick AD right now just because I think he fits what they're looking for more. But like if I wanted, I'm looking at this as which player would I want to be the centerpiece of my team?
Well, and that's an important point for this conversation too, because if you really think about it, like it's hard to imagine what Wemby looks like outside of San Antonio. But like I have had many of thoughts about what he would look like paired with Luka Doncic. And so like if you're telling me like in some weird fantastical world we woke up this morning and the same front office that passed on Dillingham decided to trade Wemby to Dallas for Omax Prosper and 473 picks, then I like and you're asking me, do I take Wemby today paired with Luka Doncic after seeing what Luka has done with Derek Lively? That's tough, man. Like I think like that's an indefensible lob threat for one. Like I don't know what you do with that. So context is a huge part of it. He's just AD's just fundamentally playing on a better team.
Yeah, fundamentally playing on a better team, and it really, when you ask the question, because AD is a complementary piece on his team. He may be the best player in the Lakers. I would actually argue that he probably is, but he's the second. He's not the alpha on his team. For LeBron James is the primary player on that team. AD plays a secondary role on offense to LeBron James, who's the hub of the offense. And meanwhile, Wemby, as we said, he's been the hub of the Spurs offense since day one. When his Spurs teammates remember that fact.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. As long as there was a point guard out there willing to acknowledge that fact.
But I think that Wemby last year, especially in the end of the year, the thing that was striking was he was the hub, not only generating offense for himself, but for his teammates. The Spurs offense really only worked when he would have the ball and be able, and because he can just look over players. He tries sort of daring passes. He's part of the new breed of European centers that Sengun falls into, that just tries these very dramatic, very flary passes. They like these behind the back passes through defenders. A lot of and he developed a lot of chemistry, especially with the Spurs wings, on back cuts, on open 3-pointers, the old Tim Duncan post up, wait for the double team, then kick out to the open shooter. He mastered that. And AD, for all that he does well, and he's an okay passer. He's not like a Kevin McHale style black hole where the ball just goes into him and it's not going back out. That's the end of it, guys. But that's not part of his game. And I think that I was looking at this through the prism of, if I was building a team with this as the centerpiece, which one would I would choose? And for that, I would probably take Wemby, because I think that he would have the ability to create more offense as well for his teammates. But as you said, I think this is AD. We forget when we talk about AD about how just fantastic he is. He is truly an all-time great defensive player. In another era, he would have been. He has a great
AD is, in the last 3 years, has become Tyler Hero-ish in that he catches shit, and it's just like not at the same level. Like Tyler Hero obviously is not the level of player that AD is. But when you listen to people talk about Tyler Hero, you'd think he was a dude with 2 left feet and no hands being asked to dribble a basketball. And like they act like he can't do anything. He's not a bad player. Like, I don't know what you want him to be, but he ain't a bad player. AD, people talk about him as though he's just been MIA. Like just doesn't show up, doesn't play well, like all this stuff. Dude played almost every game last year and was absolutely fantastic. I do think Wemby should have got Defensive Player of the Year.
Yes.
I don't think Rudy should have finished second in Defensive Player of the Year, though. I think AD should have finished second. I think Rudy should have been third. And AD is like he was. If you remember, like one of the crazy things about AD was he was always kind of seen. Had certain aspects of his game was sort of similar, his ability in the mid range, stuff like that, to like a Joel Embiid, but like his he was very much physically a late bloomer, and played point guard for a large chunk of his life. And so for a 5, AD actually has a pretty good handle.
Yeah.
And like it's just that Wemby's a freak. Like you're just talking about something completely different.
He's
You're
like doing
also
sham
talking,
god moves. Yeah, like as a 7'5" dude. He's doing like sham god dribbling, so it's just we never seen that. It's
and in addition to that, the European part's important to mention in this as well. Like, so I'm 6'8". I was told my whole life it didn't matter if I was the best shooter. It didn't matter if I was a good ball handler. Get your ass under the basket, play with your back to the goal. Like, and AD very much came up in a time where like he was going to learn to play exclusively, once he transitions to the big position. And he has some making up in terms of like basketball knowledge because it happened so late for him. Like he had some skills to acquire in that respect. I don't disagree. But part of what you see in Wemby with the ball handling and his willingness to try certain things like the Sham God, he nutmegged a dude last year in the preseason, if I remember correctly. Um, like you see the confidence of someone who's been raised and taught basketball in a way that encourages him to push the envelope, to test barriers, to see what he's capable of. Whereas I think AD has been forced into a more traditional big role. Not saying AD was ever going to be that type of ball handler or that was ever going to be his strong suit. I'm really just pointing out that I think that you're going to see, I think to a certain extent, you see it with Luka Doncic and Jokic as well. Very creative play creators, shot creators for other people. Um, and I think you see that in Wemby. I just think that when you see it in somebody who's 7'4", it's more remarkable than it is when you see it in a 6'8", 250-pound point guard or a 7', 285-pound center.
Yeah, I also think when we talk about Wemby, he may have an argument for being the most coordinated 7 foot plus person to ever walk the earth.
I don't know about walk the earth. He's the most
Yeah.
coordinated and athletic one that's ever gone to the NBA. I
Yeah.
don't know how many 7'4" people are born that don't go to the NBA either.
Yeah, well, I mean, 1 in 6 7 footers by themselves have played in the NBA, like on that have since the NBA existed. So I would imagine 7'4", and a lot of them like typically your 7'4" dudes are much more George Merjon than they are Wemby. Like they tend to be sort of plodding mastodons who like are unable to like move laterally, and that's just because humans just aren't designed to be that tall. Yeah, yeah.
Shaq's boy is the only one I know of that is even like comparable to Wemby.
Bull.
Yeah, Bobo. Yeah, and before him and Wemby, in terms of like really, really, really big, skilled. I mean, like this guy's nowhere. I'm not making this comparison. I'm just noting the fact that he was coordinated and skilled was Yao Ming.
Yeah,
The rest of them didn't even have that.
I mean, the best historical comparison for Wemby is actually Ralph Sampson, in terms like both tall and like Ralph got a bunch of injuries, but like if you watch like especially the '86 Western Conference Finals where they beat the Lakers, like he had the same type of gazelle like moving ability, and at his peak he was very agile as well. But even there,
So
we're talking about a different level of skill. Like Ralph Sampson wasn't doing he wasn't nutmegging guys, for example. Yeah.
so to summarize the Wemby Anthony Davis discussion, like for me, I think I'm taking Anthony Davis, though it's a close call, which in and of itself, like a player of an all NBA level player like Anthony Davis is, being in the same discussion as a guy going into his second year is remarkable in and of itself, and especially seeing how the discussion isn't entirely insane. Like, but I'm taking AD simply because I think at this particular point, with both the maturity of his game and the maturity of his body, that the strength and like the solid identity of his game just gives Anthony Davis a slight edge over Wemby. And you're taking Wemby over Anthony Davis for what reasons?
Basically the more expansive skill set. I think, the better passing ability, I think offsets the AD's more polished interior scoring game, which I agree is a big plus in AD's category. I mean, I think Wemby, if I were doing Wemby's development, I would prioritize him playing in the post and just make him, lock him in a room and make him watch Kareem Abdul-Jabbar clips for a month and a half. Just like come out with a skyhook, and because I think that once he
He'll never be
develops,
blocked.
yeah, he'll never be blocked. But once he develops that, like then he can expand out further and further away. But I think the relative value of a 7'4" person in the post compared to a 7'4" person bombing away from three is significantly higher in the post than it is, at the 3-point line. And then I think that defensively you give the edge to Wemby, but it's relatively a wash, as you said before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of depends. Like, so you take that shot Jamal Murray hit over Anthony Davis in the postseason
Yes.
to sort of seal the series for Denver.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think it sealed the series. I think that was game 2. I might be wrong. Everybody remembers the
I
shot.
think that won the series. I think he made that shot to win the series. I think he made 2 of them in the series or something like that. Yeah.
So everybody remembers that Jamal Murray gets the switch onto AD. They ISO him. AD actually does a pretty good job of staying with Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray drives baseline, hits a really tough fadeaway jump shot over Anthony Davis. In that circumstance, I think that Wemby is a better defender, like guarding a guard in space. And I don't know that shot ever gets to the rim with Wemby there. If it does, I have a hard time believing the 100 or the 90-degree arc that it's going to have to take to get there over Wemby. I have a hard time believing that it's going to drop. So, like, I'd take Wemby in that example. If you're going up against Jokic, I think I would go with AD because I think you need a bigger body. That's part of what I mean whenever I say the physical maturity. Like, I still think Wemby really has to put on some weight in order to. I mean, it's just the nature of the position he plays. He's going to have to bang with people like Jokic, and in the Olympics, you saw how Jokic dealt with Wemby.
No, I mean it's just the reality of it. He was 210 pounds last year. It's hard to be a center at 210 pounds. It's just you're just not big enough. You get guys who are 280 pounds. And that size differential, even if they're smaller than you, they'll create enough space to get their shot off by just being able to knock you out of the way. So he's going to have to bulk up. I don't think he has to be 280, but I think if he gets up to 235, 250, I think that makes a big difference. I
think to bang with the Embiids or the Jokic's, he's going to have to be probably about 250, 240. So right now we're unanimous. I think that Luka over Shai.
Yep.
We're barely split on AD over Wemby. I think we're moving to let's just stay with bigs. Why don't you go ahead and bring up the next comp?
Yeah, so I was looking at, let's just include Chet as part of last year's rookie class, since that was his rookie year by NBA, by league purposes, since that was the first year he played. I think that the rookies who played it, whose first year was last year, we have a chance to have out of that class an all-time great bigs class. And so, after Wemby, I think the next two in contention for next great NBA big are Chet Holmgren and Derek Lively. And Holmgren, I think from the get-go at the beginning of last year, I think everyone was understood that he was going to be at this level. Lively, he just come off a season at Duke where I think he averaged 5 points and 4 rebounds. Everyone saw the potential, but no one put him in in this tier, but he anchored a Dallas defense that was arguably probably the second best defense after the Celtics in the entire postseason. But
I think that run actually began with them not long after the trade deadline. Like their defense, once PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford were there, that defense really, really, really took shape, and they sustained an elite level defense for quite a run.
And most impressively, I mean, he outplayed Ivica Zubac, who's a solid, not all-star level, but one of the better bigs, one of the better centers in the league, one of the most physical and biggest by far. Quite frankly, he outplayed Holmgren in the Mavericks versus
great footwork on Zubac too.
Yep. And then most impressively, he was the best center on the floor in a series that had Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, and Naz Reid in it. And he, more than they would not have won that series, at least not in 5 games, without Lively and his ability to offensive rebound, protect the rim, crash the rim, provide a vertical threat. So I wanted to sort of ask you, if we're comparing Holmgren and Holmgren Lively, who do you think is going to have the better career? Who do you think is going to be the next best big in this class?
Well, I'll start by saying if we're having this conversation and it's not out of pocket, that the Dallas Mavericks almost certainly can chalk that up as a win. But I guess my thoughts on this would be to just state my answer up front. I think Chet is certainly I think Chet's a better basketball player than Derek Lively. So I guess the question becomes are we talking about them as individual players isolated from the situations in which they're in? Or are we talking about them as players within their given contexts?
Well, I think that question's more interesting here than it would seem, because I think that the center position, more so than any other position in the NBA, outside of maybe the point guard position, exists in its own. The center is the person who's primarily responsible for being the rim protector, primarily responsible for being the major rebounder. And there's specific things that are associated with centers, even in this sort of era of, this positionless era. So I would agree with you 100%. I don't think there's really any, with his, his handle, his shooting, he's much more polished player. Chet's much more polished than Lively.
100%.
I think if you're asking who's the better center, I think that there are things that Chet can't do that Lively does.
Yeah. Well, also I think if it's not a theoretical discussion and we're talking about it within the concrete reality of their given circumstances on their given teams, what Chet's being asked to do is be a third scoring option that creates his own shot. I'll circle back to the conversation I had, or we had earlier about Luka and Shai. I mean, in fact, I think that you could even make the argument that, the way this conversation's about to shake out is more evidence that Luka is a better player than Shai. And I think that Shai makes things easier for Chet in that Shai draws the majority of the defense's attention.
Yes.
However, Luka also does that. Luka, in fact, to a probably even greater degree, Luka compromises defenses before the play is even initiated. Luka's presence on the court forces defenses to weight themselves and shift and all that. So I think that, Chet is in the position where he's being asked to play outside in and create his own shot, whereas Derek Lively is being asked to play off of Luka, off of Kyrie. I mean, I don't know where you rank Kyrie as an all-time great guard in the NBA, but he's up there.
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving is an all-time great. And, Luka Doncic has only been in the NBA for 6 years, but, I don't have any qualms about saying when he's done, he will be considered an all-time great. And so Lively's playing off of that. And his particular skill set enables him, like what Luka and Kyrie do for him, accentuate his talents to such a degree that Derek Lively looks. I think that Derek Lively in his given situation is more valuable to Dallas than Chet is in his given situation. I think there are other players, a considerable number of other players, who could step onto the Oklahoma City Thunder roster and give them what they're expecting from Chet. Minus the shot blocking. Chet is a really, really, really good shot blocker.
Yep.
Derek Lively's pretty good at that too, though. I think that Derek Lively is a more athletic player than Chet. And that's saying something, because I don't even think Chet's like non-athletic. I think Chet's a pretty good athlete. Chet's not as strong as Derek Lively. Look, if I'm building a team and I'm starting from scratch, I'm probably going to check Chet Holmgren over Derek Lively. But if you're asking me which one is a more valuable player within their given context, I think Derek Lively does more to contribute to winning in Dallas than Chet does to contribute to winning in Oklahoma City. And I think that's the most succinct way of putting it, because I think Oklahoma City is asking Chet to do something that there is a very definite ceiling on his ability to do.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And like full disclosure, the reason I added this question was as much as I think that it's a way to have a second conversation about both like what do you need from a center position on a winning team, and more so.
Well, to be fully clear, you're spot on, because they had to go out and get Hartenstein because there's so many things Chet's either incapable of doing, or what you're asking Chet to do precludes him from being able to do those other things.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. And specifically to the case of Chet Holmgren, is he actually a center? And like that sounds like a weird question to ask for a guy who's 7'2". But the Chet Holmgren's game is a classic power forward game with 3-point shooting attached to it. He drives to the hoop. He has a couple of post moves. Like the Thunder, especially when their offense bogs down, it devolves, unfortunately for him, into him just sort of being a 3-point shooter. With like they will have a tendency to forget him in tight games because it becomes the Jalen Williams Shai show. But where I see Chet evolving, because his value as a defender at this point is really limited because he's so skinny. Is as a help defender. He is one of the best help defender bigs in the league. His shot blocking and help defender is fantastic. But like you put him in a post up, like Jokic, those big guys, even Wemby, like they just go through him. Like Wemby in their matchup when the Spurs won the rematch, he just started going through him because he just realized he could shove him and push him around. And it. That I don't see Chet honestly being able to put on the weight. I mean, he came back after his first year. I think he gained 5 pounds. He doesn't have a frame that's really easy to add weight to, but also, if you're
in that regard too, like I understand he lost his rookie year or whatever, but like in that regard, like gaining weight, like he didn't lose it. Like he in fact, he had ample time to work on that particularly. There seems to be an inability to do it.
Zion Williamson added the equivalent of Chet Holmgren in weight in his injury seasons. That's mean to Zion, I apologize. But that was out of line. But he's one of those people I think it's just hard for him to add in. Like, he's not in there of avoiding the weight room. Like, he's trying to do this. The team clearly identifies this. This is not a genius move by me to be like, Chet Holmgren needs to get stronger. Like that's everyone realizes that. So it's a little if he's not been able to add weight in now year 3 in terms of his NBA contract, it's probably going to be difficult for him to add significant weight going forward. And for me, that means that his value going forward is probably as a power forward. I think the Thunder's paying $30 million.
I think they've acknowledged that in the acquisition of Hartenstein. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, going back, like if we're analyzing this like you said on talent, Lively he's the potential is tantalizing. You can see it, but he is never going to be you're never going to see him take people off the dribble from the perimeter. That's never going to be his game. He's going to be a classic center, and don't take me wrong, you can win 3-4 titles with him as your centerpiece as center. I think I have no doubt. And the Mavs say so as well. You saw Marcus Morris say that Markieff Morris, sorry, say he thinks that Lively's going to be the best center in the league in the next 3 years. Seems a little bullish, but he's definitely going to be a multi-time All-Star. But if we're looking at this from the perspective of who's going to be the best center, I think that right now that's Lively, because I think Lively gives you things that you need at the center position that Chet really can't deliver on.
Sure. I think it's a conversation that's difficult for Chet to compete in because, like you said, it's a conversation about who's the best big, who's the best center.
Yeah.
Chet doesn't really play that position. It seems like OKC has acknowledged that experiment doesn't work. There's not a championship formula, so they've brought in Hartenstein. I think a lot of people have failed to realize how that compromises what made Oklahoma City, at least a good regular season team with the 5-out offense, because Hartenstein completely compromises that. He is not a 5-out player. And to put a button on how much, what Derek Lively's ceiling is, I agree with you. Like, you're not going to see him beating anybody off the dribble except for maybe Zach Edey. And I think that what you could see, though, is a hyper athletic Brook Lopez.
Yes.
Because, when you start telling me that Isaiah Hartenstein is going to be a stretch 5, my initial is, okay, sure he is. Yeah. And Rob Dillingham's going to be a power forward. But it's when you watch Derek Lively shoot, you don't you can't just roundly reject the idea that he's going to be a legitimate stretch 5 in the NBA at some point. It's practice. NBA centers, a lot of them can shoot threes in practice. But there's a lot of video coming out of Dallas. There's been a lot of talk coming out of Dallas. The reporters, Dave McMahon on the Hoop Collective, basically said, if you leave Derek Lively sitting out there at the 3-point line, he may take some of those shots this year. But don't expect him to, forget what his role is. He understands what he does to contribute to winning on that team, and he's committed to that. Which, to be honest with you, I think that's another really amazing trait about Derek Lively. He really does seem to be entirely committed to winning. So I think currently Derek Lively does more to contribute to winning meaningful basketball games for the Dallas Mavericks than Chet Holmgren does to contribute to Oklahoma City winning meaningful basketball games. I think that Chet Holmgren is a more talented basketball player.
Yes.
I don't even think that's a particularly interesting discussion. I think that what you saw from Derek Lively last year, though, is a hyper athletic, strong, big guy who is extremely raw, but has the talent and the form where you look at him play and you think, like, my God, man, like, as this stuff gets refined and you see, like, all of that energy become controlled chaos, like, you're talking, like the idea that you're talking about a top 2 or 3 big in the league in the next 3 to 5 years is in no way, out of pocket to me. Like that is absolutely a possibility. And if he develops perimeter shooting, which once again, I'll say, like, you've seen him take one shot in a real NBA game, he knocked it down. But more interesting to me is watching him shoot. He has a nice form. He has touch. Like, it's not hard for me to believe that he could over time develop that talent. And if that happens, the thing you have to understand about a big with his athleticism and skill set, developing that skill, is the versatility he brings to a team at that point. I mean, you're talking about a more menacing Nas Reed.
Yeah.
Like, who I'll remind everybody on episode 1, I advocated for him basically supplanting Rudy Gobert in the rotation against a lot of teams in the NBA not named Denver. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've actually answered the question that you've posed. I've tried to answer it in the best way that I know how. But in those situations, man, like, I freely admit Chet Holmgren's a more talented player, but I think that Derek Lively does more to contribute to winning for the Dallas Mavericks than Chet Holmgren does Oklahoma City. And I don't see that changing. That's the other thing. I don't see anything in Chet's future that suggests that he's going to suddenly start contributing more to their winning. Because while Chet is good at taking some players off the dribble, guys like PJ Washington, who are strong and athletic and, like, more importantly, tough, and they get up in his chest and play him physical, they cause him problems when it comes to driving.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's been an issue and it's been recognized since he was a rookie. I think he is so far too skinny, like on the too skinny scale, that it affects his ability to really shove around the post. Now, he is tenacious as hell. He fights for everything. He is he's a true competitor, but there's something you just can't overcome. And there's a reason why OKC struggled so much to get offensive rebounds in the Dallas series, and why consistently throughout last year they struggled to get struggled to get like defensive rebounds off of off of like missed free throws, like that, situations where it's just sort of like wrestling type situations where you have to be able to establish position and keep it and not get shoved underneath the hoop, because basically other centers would shove Holmgren underneath the basket as the ball's in the air and then grab the offensive rebound and put it back in. That's just a weakness that, absent a complete change in terms of his physique, he's not going to be able to resolve. There's not if he doesn't get stronger, there's not a way to just offset that.
Yeah. Well, and you like, Thunder fans are going to be like, well, you remember this? Look at his stat line from last year, blah blah blah. Like, man, in the regular season, I think a lot of what I'm saying doesn't apply. But you put the Lakers up against Oklahoma City in the playoffs, and one of the problems I have with that is I think that both Rui Hachimura and LeBron move their feet so well and they're so big that Chet's not going to be able to push them off the spot. Like, he's not, especially with LeBron, he's not fast enough or quick enough to just take him off the dribble. He needs to be able to get a step and then use his body to take the path to the basket. And I'm sorry, but, like, if we're talking about a contest of strength, between Chet Holmgren and LeBron James. That's like me challenging Noah Lyles to a 100-meter dash. Like, it's just like there's not a prayer in hell, right? Like,
I would agree. Yeah, we're not trying to criticize Chet. I think what we're trying to say is Chet's a 4. He's not a 5. And that just changes. That means his playing him as center, as like they did last year, puts him at a disadvantage, especially in the playoffs.
oh, when he runs up against Anthony Davis or Nikola Jokic or Domantas Sabonis, he's unplayable at the 5.
Yeah. All right.
You got to have Hartenstein there for
that. Yeah, I mean that's why they got him. That's why they overpaid for him. That's just I think.
Yeah, but then it means we've got 2 guys on the floor who don't really score.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the problem they've got to resolve.
All right. So next one we have. Jokic.
Yeah, this is the best post Steph Curry era, Warriors era bigs.
Best overall players, I'd argue. I think, since the KD Warriors, the 2 players that have won the most MVPs, won the most awards, both won titles, have become honestly 2 of the major faces of the league and part of the European revolution that's sort of taken over the NBA at the highest level. It's Jokic and Giannis. And Giannis has been hurt the last 2 postseasons, so I think he gets sort of lost in the conversations for the best player in the league. But if you just take a look at his stats, 30, 10, and 6.5 last year, 60% shooting, still a fantastic defender. He is he's already, in my opinion, one of the 20 best players in NBA history. I firmly think that the best player in the league discussion is, sort of a 3-headed monster of Jokic, Doncic, and Giannis right now. And I wondered, like, when you analyze the 2 of them, I think Jokic is probably, he's one of the most well-rounded offensive players in NBA history, just point blank. But the unique combination with Giannis of high level offense and he's won Defensive Player of the Year, high level defense. How do you weigh the 2 of them when you're comparing them?
So the other day, Shaq was on a podcast. Might have been his own podcast. I don't remember, and I don't even remember who he was talking to, but I do remember they were having the GOAT conversation, and he mentioned how he's never in those discussions, and he doesn't think that he should be, but he is, in his opinion, and in my opinion too, one of the most dominant players to ever play basketball. And I think that it's a similar dichotomy with Jokic and Giannis. I don't even need time to think about which of these 2 are better basketball player. Jokic is a better basketball player than Giannis. I think Giannis is great. Like I literally think that the Milwaukee Bucks have the potential this year to beat Boston in the playoffs and represent the Eastern Conference in the finals if Chris Middleton's healthy and is able to perform in the playoffs like he did last year, and which I have no idea whether that'll be the case or not. And I think Dame and Giannis's pairing needs to be they need to be more gelled and on the same page. But I think I expect that to happen. And so I think Giannis is that dominant a player. I mean, you're talking about a legit 7-footer who looks like he just descended from Mount Olympia to crush people with a basketball. He is a physical specimen unlike anything we have ever seen. And he moves so fast and fluidly. It has to be one of the most terrifying things any NBA player has ever experienced, to look up and see that freight train just coming at them. I watched Giannis just jump over a dude in New Orleans and dunk it. He is an unreal, just freak. Like his nick, the Greek freak, is just like a perfect way of describing what this guy is. Jokic is more like, I don't know if this may seem like the weirdest comparison ever, but like this is the best way I can think to describe Nikola Jokic. And I don't even know if the story's true, and I can't remember the name of it, but it works so great to explain it. Years ago, there was apparently, and it was in reference to the Iran nuclear facility. So anybody listening now knows I'm about to give you an all-time great analogy. This is awesome. And so Nikola Jokic is like the U.S. and Israel were trying to figure out how to handicap the Iran nuclear facility. And they developed this virus that would effectively, very similar, if I understood correctly, very similar to kind of what you saw in Ocean's 11, where they like hack the security feeds and they're showing you like all this tape delay stuff of the vault where it looks like everything's secure, but in reality, people have infiltrated the vault and they're stealing stuff. Well, like the production of the nuclear facility, you're seeing like old data about it, and manufactured data that looks like the production is trending in the way that it was supposed to, when in reality, this virus has halted production and created problems, and it set timeline back on the nuclear facility. And this was some, thing that America and Israel had worked together to do to the Iran nuclear facility. And the way they got it in there was they basically like were uploading like porn and like Britney Spears music videos and stuff on CD-ROMs, and then leaving them places that people who worked at the nuclear facility would find it, and then put the disk into their computer, and then that would upload the virus to the computer, which then when it got on the network with the nuclear facility, because it's not online, would infiltrate the nuclear facility, and that's how the virus got. That's Nikola Jokic. He's that virus. Like he goes, like they put him out on the floor. They put the ball in his hands. He infiltrates your defense and he completely deconstructs you in a way that like you just can't, like there's nothing that you can do about it. He sees the game as it's happening and sees whatever it is that you're willing to live and die on. And he makes you die on that. The death of 1,000 cuts. He's not preoccupied with getting his scoring numbers up. He's not preoccupied with getting his assist numbers up. He doesn't care. Whatever window you're providing him, whatever vulnerability you're comfortable with having exposed, he's going to bludgeon it to death. And it's like this slow, methodical grind that just like infiltrates the game, and you can just see the other team. It's like you said when we were talking about the Lakers series. Like Lakers would be up by huge numbers, and then like you could like pinpoint it. Like there would just be a moment where it's like Denver scores 6 in a row, and you're like, about to happen.
Over. Yeah.
They're down by 14, but you're like, oh, it's over. Yeah. Like, and like you just see that the virus has taken hold, and the Lakers are starting to wither. They're being deconstructed in a way that they're just not going to be able to recover from. And if Jokic is, for Jokic, that means creating that opportunity for Jamal Murray, he's fine with that. There's not a thing in him that opposes that. He's fine with creating that opportunity for Jamal Murray. He's fine with it being Aaron Gordon catching lob dunks on, late lobs over help defenders. Like he's fine with it being Michael Porter Jr. He doesn't care. He takes what the defense gives him and he destroys them with it.
Yeah, I mean, there you have it, folks. Nikola Jokic is the Stuxnex virus, I think is what it was. No, I agree. I think if we're talking about offense, it's not a discussion. Nikola Jokic is the most talented offensive player, one of the 5 most talented offensive players in NBA history. What he does, he's Mozart with the basketball. I mean, he truly like he sees things. He more so than any player. Like some of the greatest passes in NBA history have been just Jokic catching the ball one handed and then throwing a 60-foot baseball pass that like catches Aaron Gordon right at the exact perfect spot for an alley oop. And it's truly amazing, especially at his size. We never see it.
That's the thing. It's the size. Because like Luka Doncic, I think is like, in many ways more skillful. Like sees the court like Jokic does, can make all those crazy passes. Jokic's size enables him to be largely unperturbed by anything that you do. Like he just doesn't give a shit. Like he couldn't give a shit what you're doing. Like that's the thing about him. Like that has to be so infuriating if you're Darvin Ham.
Yeah.
Like you remember the Quinn Snyder rant about Luka Doncic where he's like, I don't know, what do you want me to do? You think he cares if he goes left? You think he cares if he goes right? You think he cares if he shoots a three or if it's a floater or if it's a pass to a guy in the corner? Like you just imagine coaches who are having to deal with Nikola Jokic and they're just like, dude, I don't know. Like what does it even fucking matter what we do? Who cares what we do? He's just going to destroy us. Like I know you can't have that mindset. But like after the series is over, I guarantee you they're going home thinking.
You could see it even especially in the first Lakers Nuggets series. There's that famous Jokic hitting that step back over, a shot over his head 3-pointer over an outstretched AD that I believe did it bank in? I think he banked it in. And
I don't remember. I remember the shot. Yeah.
There's the famous video of AD and his shoulders are slumping. And no one got mad at him because that there's what do you do at that point? That's literally unblockable. But I do think that when we're analyzing who's the best player in the world, with this sort of like, as you said, Jokic and Luka are kind of the same mold of players. Like Jokic is kind of like a post version of Luka, and Luka's kind of a point guard, an actual point guard version of Jokic. I do think that we extol their ability on the offensive end, and rightfully so. But there is, we do lose track of the true value of an absolutely elite two-way player. I'm not saying they're bad defenders. I think both of them are actually better defenders than they get credit for. They're not like turnstiles. But Giannis is probably even still the most disruptive help defender in the NBA in terms of just being able to blow up passing lanes. His famous help side block against Ayton in the finals. Like his intensity on that end never lags. He's perfectly comfortable getting dunked on, and it'll just pop back up. And I think that there is a value of a player who is able to provide absolutely 99th percentile play on both ends, as opposed to a player who's more like 100th percentile on one end but 68th 70th percentile on the other. I think the question is like, how much do you weigh that compared to the fact that Jokic is is a better shooter, probably a better post player, and a better passer. And and I think that sort of the answer to that lies.
The problem isn't that he's a better passer. Like I mean, like compared to Giannis, he's a significantly better shooter. But like like Jokic and shooting, like he like him and Luka, there's significant differences between them in the shooting department. The thing with Giannis and Jokic, when you start to compare like passing, Jokic is like an all-time great passer. He's not just a better passer. Like he's an all-time great creator.
No,
like
that's in my opinion that what's the differentiator is that we're talking about someone in Giannis who is an elite functional passer, like they call them. Like if he sees the play, like an obvious, like he will get the ball to where it needs to be. But he's not someone who's gonna like play chess while with passing and like see a play opening before it happens and like whip the ball behind his head or like throw a no look pass over his head to hit Aaron Gordon against the Lakers for the ninth time in a row. That's just not in his repertoire, and that's not a problem because there's like three players on earth who can do that. Like the difference in terms of their ability on that end is is so vast that I think it outweighs the extra value that Giannis provides on defense. I also the shooting is also a big issue. Like one of the things with Giannis, and this has been well covered, but his value in end of game situations where you need to like creating the last shot in like a half court game can be it gets a little like he's not his ability becomes a little more reduced in those settings that they have a set defense because he really doesn't have he doesn't even really trust his mid-range jumper, and and so defenses just sag off of him. And sometimes,
they play him the way the Lakers played Zion.
Yeah, he sort of barrels in the five players, and the ball goes trickling out. And that's why you'll see like Chris Middleton be the closer in some situations. Now it will be Damian Lillard, for example. But
that's what I was about to say. Was like this was such a glaring problem that Milwaukee even realized like we got to bring in a closer. Like, and I agree with you too. Like when you think about like Denver on their championship run and all the success that Denver's had in recent years, like you think about the end of tight games, like that ball's in Jokic's hands.
Absolutely.
And like, he's one of the greatest decision makers in NBA history. He's one of the best creators in NBA history. And he's an elite scorer. And so like he can he'll get you whatever you need.
Yep.
Whatever's possible will be actualized in that moment is basically 100%. is what I think. Whereas with Giannis in that moment, what is possible is very limited. You have to put the ball in someone else's hands because you're just asking him to go full head of steam at the rim, and any team who has an iota of intelligence is just going to build a wall around the rim.
So yeah, I think we're both on board that that's a Jokic. And it's truly, I mean, honestly, it is remarkable for a player who, I mean, I know he's 7 feet tall, but he probably shoots set shots more than he shoots non-set shots, which is like that hasn't been the case for any major player since like Joe Flux in the 1950s. And like it is truly remarkable what he's been able to do, given that he is not someone even at his height who has the athleticism of an NBA star, put it that way, like at his position. And it is,
he has incredible footwork though.
He does. He has the footwork of a dancer. And I think that gets undercovered by his post game. He is the least perturbed player on offense you'll ever see. He can get a shot block and it will just bounce back to him, and he'll be like, "Oh, interesting." And he'll just, and it does not faze him. It doesn't upset him. He'll just go back up, and that is one of the deterrence for him doesn't really impact him because he just sort of
Here's the other thing about Jokic, like you think with the deterrence thing, like he when I say whatever is available, he will take it. Like he can be mean as hell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like he can be downright violent. Like that's the type of he is. I don't mean dirty. I just mean that like if he realizes in a given moment that the best option is for him to just go through whoever the defender is,
he's happy to do it.
He'll wreck that dude. He will wreck that guy. And so it's really weird because I agree with you. I think Giannis is one of the. I think he's the third best player in the world. I think that like if you're going, I think based on what we saw last year, I actually think Luka Doncic was the best player in the world last year. I'm not going to argue with anybody who tells me it's Jokic. I think this will be the year that Luka claims that mantle, like where people just acknowledge it more readily that Luka is the best player in the world. But I don't think like there's a debate in my mind for who's 1 and 2.
Yes.
It's settling on Luka. There's no debate for who's 3 to me. Like that's settled. Giannis is the third best basketball player in the world.
Yep. I think we're in agreement. And this question was more of like the body of work for the last 7 years.
If it's a body of work for the last 7 years too, I think you still have to give it to Jokic.
Yeah. And I think but I think we're both in agreement there, and I think we're with both of them. These are all-time great players. These are both players.
Yeah.
Jokic is definitely guaranteed a spot at the end of his career unless he retires like tomorrow as a top 10 player. Where how high he goes up is going to depend on how his teams perform and how long he chooses to play, because he's one of those players who could play to 40.
He's also one of those guys who could be like, "Hey guys, I'm ready to go play with my horses, and I'll see y'all later."
Yeah, but and Giannis, I think, is someone who's firmly ensconced in the top 20, and we'll just have to see, where how much higher he gets up. All right, so we got 2 more. Next one up, and this is the one I'm most excited about: Ant versus Ja.
This is the sexiest one.
Yes, by far. Probably, good marketing would have had us do this one at the top, but what do you think?
It's so close. I don't even know that I have an answer to this question, to be quite honest with you. Because we're really having kind of like who's better out of the 2 candidates for face of the league type debate right now. And
we're arguing who's the best out of the Team USA's future backcourt, which is basically what we're arguing right now. Because in the next one, I think they're going to be the 2, like point guard and shooting guard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of it's funny that you say that, because I think that that's kind of where I landed in my mind was I thought kind of depends on the role. But I think that Ja Morant's clearly a better point guard. He's a better creator, better passer than Anthony Edwards. I think that strangely, Anthony Edwards, I honestly didn't expect this, but I took a peek at Basketball Reference, and Anthony Edwards shoots the 3 a little better than Ja Morant does. I didn't expect that. He's Anthony Edwards is shooting it at career 35% 3-point shooter, whereas Ja Morant's a 31% 3-point shooter. I think Ja Morant's basically doubled him up on not doubled him up. He's got about 3 assists more per game at 7 assists, whereas Anthony Edwards is at 4 assists per game. And you also saw that weakness really exposed in the playoffs last year, the last 2 games versus the Nuggets. They exposed his, weakness as a playmaker, and the Mavericks, carried that on, and he struggled to recover from that. So I'll say this: if I'm forced to choose between these 2, I'm gonna take Anthony Edwards, and my reason for taking Anthony Edwards is honestly the main reason would have less to do with talent and more to do with Anthony Edwards is bigger and stronger. And I think built to withstand their style of play more than Ja Morant is. Ja Morant, how aggressive, how fast, downhill, fearless he is at attacking the rim. I've got a little concern about him going in there and, challenging some of these bigs and being able to live to tell about it the next day. Whereas Anthony Edwards coming full head of steam down the lane and going up, and challenging one of these bigs that are standing flat-footed and just going straight up. I honestly don't know which of the two are coming out, on top with that. Like I think Anthony Edwards could be the one dealing out the pain. It's hard. It's hard to I mean, it's very difficult to separate the two in my mind. I see them almost perfectly equal with one another, but I lean more towards Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, I think the difference is Ja's a little taller than people realize. He's like 6'3", so like he's not like super tall for a point guard. But he's 6'3". Edwards is listed at 6'4". The difference between the two of them is Edwards has 50 pounds on him. Like Ja is 6'3",
Yeah.
175, and Edwards is 6'4", 225. And so and that's
a strong 225.
Yeah. And I think and I think that's sort of reflected in their style of play. These are two of the what I would say 25 most athletic players in NBA history. Like we're talking about, both of them have had some of the most impressive in-game dunks ever seen.
If you were to limit the field of contestants from just NBA history down to like people who are actually elite players in the league during their time,
yes,
like they're probably top 5 to 10 most athletic.
Right now, I would take Ja. And I think that what's happened to Ja a little bit is that his off-court stuff has seeped over into our perception of him as a player. 2 years ago, we were talking about Ja before all this stuff happened, obviously. We were talking about Ja like we were talking about Morant now. We're talking about Edwards now. Minus he's the next, clone of Michael Jordan. And the big difference on offense between both of them is that Morant is a significantly better playmaker, which is understandable because he's a point guard than Edwards is. Edwards' biggest flaw right now, and I think this is probably because he never had to do it, is that he's not someone who can, like, when defenses are fully committed to just shutting him down, who's able with consistency to hit the open man, or to see the defensive help coming and identify where the ball needs to go next,
or to create an open man.
Yes, or to create an open man. That's not there. Ja can actually do that. Ja's really good at that. And I think that Edwards is better defensively. I think that there is a big difference there, but I think that the relative value of their defense, like point guards tend to actually all be bad at defense because point guards are guarding the fastest, most athletic player on the other team, and so they just tend not to be as good, and that's the position on the court where if you're going to have a bad defender, having a bad point guard defender is probably the best relative value in terms of just keeping your defense, the integrity of your defense. But I would I would go with Morant. Now, the big question I do have about that is we haven't seen Morant play with the new the new rules that allow more physicality. I think that will have some impact. Morant is an incredibly, he plays with such physicality and ferociousness that, that may in some cases actually play to his advantage. But 175, when you're around that weight and, at his height, if people are allowed to shove in you and push you a little bit more, we could see that impact him in a negative way. So, but, he missed all last year. So we, especially the tail end of last year. So we didn't really get to see him play with those rules. So it's hard for me to really tell, honestly, what impact that is. He's basically missed 1.5 years because of all the off-court stuff and then his hand injury. But if we're just if we're assuming that Morant hits the ground running at the level he was before, I think that he is right now probably probably a more skilled offensive player, I would say, than Edwards is. And
I don't disagree with that. Like the thing I would say about Anthony Edwards and the reason I'm taking him, I think there are 3 things. One is I think and then I guess maybe breaking the rules a little bit of our conversation because we've talked about this isn't about futures, this is about now. I think that both of them have room for their game to grow. I think that Anthony Edwards' size and strength means his game will be a little bit more durable, and it will enable him to do more things on both the offensive and defensive end of the floor than Ja will be able to do. I also think you're going to there's been a steady progression to Anthony Edwards' jump shot and 3-point shooting.
Yes.
I expect to see that progression continue. I think that the person who stands to benefit the most from their time with Team USA over the past 2 summers is Anthony Edwards.
I agree with that.
And so, I think those are really and then the durability thing. I think Anthony Edwards' size and strength also means he will be less injury prone given the style of basketball that both he and Ja Morant play. So I those are once again, I love Ja Morant. I don't have anything negative to say about him. And it's kind of like the Jokic Giannis conversation, except for it's harder to choose between Anthony Edwards and Ja Morant than it was Jokic and Giannis. But for me, I think that, and also quite frankly, it's early, but it's concealed because of Anthony Edwards' personality. He's very outspoken. Very much seems like the kind of guy who's always looking to have a good time. But I get the impression that Anthony Edwards eats, sleeps, breathes basketball.
100%.
There is nothing else going on. He's like Kevin Durant. There's nothing else going on in this dude's life other than basketball. I always say, Embiid's one of the most talented basketball players in the world, no question about it. But if we're talking about winning championships, you're just gonna have to show me a full season of him healthy. I think that I'm not worried about Ja Morant continuing to wave guns around on Instagram. I think that might be a problem that's been rehabilitated. However, there is an immaturity in that, especially the second time. It's honestly hard to understand the second instance, to be quite honest with you. But there's an immaturity in that. There's
a petulance in it that's odd. Put it that way.
Yeah, and I don't see that in Anthony Edwards. I see Anthony Edwards entirely focused on basketball, and I think that when I say this, I'm not saying I like that more than I like what I see in Ja Morant. What I'm saying is I think that is a quality or a trait that you see in that person that will have a direct impact on the way that their careers unfold. And it may not mean that Ja Morant, relapses into those types of issues. But I think what you will find with Anthony Edwards is that quality of his will find itself funneling into the development of his game and his career in a way that leads to him growing at a faster rate than Ja Morant, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I see the maturity as a factor that will play into their growth and development as a player.
Yeah, I think that I think it's fair to say that they both had sort of a plucked from relative obscurity. They weren't obscure, but they were both sort of designated as the next heir apparent of the crown of the future face of the NBA. And if you compare how they both reacted and to being sort of given that label, one of them kind of imploded pretty spectacularly after that. I think that it was, it sort of led to some. He was in over his head, and the other one, well, he did have his other, he himself had some, minor, public incidents, but he dealt with it with a lot more maturity, and it did seem like he was always, his focus on basketball stayed a lot more obvious than for Morant, who had all sorts of other stuff going on. I mean, like, we talked about the gun waving incident, but there's other incidents where like he was like beating up a kid that a high schooler that he was hosting basketball games for high schoolers at his house, which is another like, why are you doing this? This seems just like a thing that could only end poorly. And other incidents about being sued by mall security guards because his mom and his dad were trying to beat him up. It's all sorts of stuff, and I think that Morant really does need to show that he is able to lock in and focus on his job, honestly, in a way that will allow them to reach the next level. I think that's a perfectly fair thing to say because he's not showed yet that he's able to show the dedication and focus to allow Memphis to reach the next level.
Yeah, and even if you take it more in the affirmative, talking about Anthony Edwards, I just think that what I've seen from him and his personality is an attitude that's going to nourish his growth and development in a way that takes his game to a level that is decidedly above where Ja Morant is. And I think part of that, like, I don't think he will ever be decidedly better than Ja Morant as an offensive player. But I think that when you factor in how big of a menace Anthony Edwards has the potential of being on defense, you could be looking at an elite two-way player in the NBA in a very short period of time.
Absolutely. All right, our last comparison, and I think we're ending on the theme of Team USA. So, and I'm gonna start this one by basically saying we're talking about the current version of these players, not the best version of them. 2024 Jayson Tatum versus 2024 LeBron James. As the world's foremost LeBron James fan, where do you fall on this?
Yeah, so and this is actually like that context for this discussion is obviously really important because, like, if I was a GM for a team and you were asking me to sign one of these two guys to a 5-year deal or a 4-year deal, like, obviously I would sign Jayson Tatum over, hitching my wagon to a 43-year-old LeBron. But with that said, earlier when we were having the Jokic conversation and the Jokic-Giannis conversation, and we were talking about, like, there's only a handful of guys in the world that can make these passes.
Yes.
And, like, when you think about Giannis being like this physically dominant guy, like how big and strong he is and how fast he is, like, the only other guy I can think of who, embodies both that strength and speed is LeBron. Like, and you're basically saying, like, when you talk about LeBron, you're talking about a guy who has, like, Giannis's game and Luka's game, and you're putting it all in one person. And like Giannis, that person is built like a brick shithouse that's coming downhill 100 miles an hour. And while 2024 LeBron isn't coming downhill the way 2014 LeBron was, you watch LeBron last year when he gets out in transition or he puts his head down and drives to the basket. LeBron still has an ability to be a freight train headed to the rim. And then I think, like, the other piece about LeBron, and obviously I'm building up to saying that I would take LeBron over Tatum in this year.
Yeah.
The other piece about LeBron for me is the IQ. Like, you're talking about one of, if not the smartest basketball players to ever play. There is an encyclopedic, like, and not like almanacked version of encyclopedic knowledge, but like a working encyclopedic knowledge of the game of basketball that like dissects the game as it's happening in a way that few players have been able to. And then, once again, that's coupled with elite athleticism. It's crazy too, because I have no idea what goes into this stat that Basketball Reference has where they project the numbers for the player moving into the next season. Whatever algorithm they're using to project that, I can't imagine that age is part of the algorithm. But they project LeBron as having 1.5 points more per game this year than he had last year. And so like, I would be willing to bet that some of that is due to the fact that you saw like the trend from the year before 2022, 2023, the trend was up in 2023, 2024. And I imagine they're projecting that trend continuing. But I take LeBron's ability to control the game, the pace of the game, to be a floor general out there while also being able to pick his spots and, more or less score at will. Also, like his 3-point shooting last year was, he's added 3-point shooting at a pretty high clip. I think he finished with 41% on the year last year. When somebody with his size, his strength and speed being able to shoot that way, it really puts defenses in a compromised position, having to worry about him pulling the trigger on that shot. Makes it easier for him to get to the rim.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to this question truly lies in what is it that we are valuing? Because the if this were 34-year-old LeBron, it's not even a debate. It's like, why are we talking about this? This is dumb. Like this is like, but coming up on on year age 40 LeBron, the way, one of his geniuses is that he has realized that he does not have the stamina anymore at his age to go all out for an entire game. So his workaround is that he typically will pick 2 quarters where he will go all out, and then he takes a back seat for 2 other quarters. Like he lets the other players go. And so the one constant is usually the fourth quarter where he saves up for that. But usually in the first or second quarter, one of the two, because he can't really do 2 quarters back to back. He just doesn't have he isn't the stamina for that. He will have 1 quarter where he just has an offensive explosion, and he'll try to get almost half of his points in that quarter alone. And so you'll see these games where LeBron James started out 8 for 12 in the first 10 minutes, and then doesn't do much for the next 20, and then has another really, really good end to the game. And the same thing is like his consistency will it doesn't vacillate crazily, but I would say that especially in a playoff setting, you can see that it can be hard for him to keep up the intensity he's playing, especially on the defensive end in the playoffs as these series drag on. I think he has made the conscious decision that if he has to prioritize one of the 2 ends of the court where he's going to put all of his effort into, it's going to be the offensive end. And I think that's absolutely the right decision. So, if we're going for an 82-game season in the full playoffs, I think there is a case to be made for Tatum, just because he's able to provide the high level play throughout a full game, throughout every quarter of the game. I think LeBron's peak is probably higher still than Tatum's, in-game peak. And I think that, honestly, the more interesting part about this is the discussion on Tatum is like, where does he stand? Because I think the discussion on him has gotten, especially online, has gotten completely out of control. I mean, a lot of players decided people didn't like last year that he said he deserved to be in the MVP debate, and then they've spent the rest of the year and the postseason dunking on him. I think that his down shooting year should rectify itself. I have very little doubt about that. I think it was more of a hitch in his shot, and just poor the weird fluctuations that happen when you shoot high volume 3-pointers. But I do think that he leads the category that falls right after the top three. Basically, it's him and Embiid are probably the two major ones, and him and Embiid and Shai. Sorry. And if you were asking me right now who I would choose out of those three to start a team, I would choose Tatum. Yeah.
Hold on, spell out those categories real quick.
Yeah, the top three we had. So we basically the top three players in the league were Luka, Jokic, and Giannis, and then there's the tier below that. I would say is probably I would say it's Shai, Embiid, and Tatum would probably be the generally accepted tier below that. Personally, I'm higher on him. I think that like what he showed in the playoffs last year, even though he wasn't shooting well, is that he can be the playmaker on the lead playmaker on a NBA championship team. He was the player that ran the offense that the Boston's offense ran through. And I thought he showed elite ability to finish at the rim. Now he was much more invested in trying to hit, his step back mid rangers than he was at attacking there. And sometimes there would be games where he didn't, he wasn't aggressive enough. But I came back out of last year thinking more so that, he did all that, even though he had a bad shooting performance in the playoffs. I think that will rectify itself. So I'm more bullish on him, this upcoming year being even better than he was last year, rather than that.
I don't know that I disagree with him being better than he was last year. Real quick, like as a my final comment on the LeBron Tatum discussion before I shift over to the where does Tatum kind of rank in the scheme of things. I think the point you made about LeBron being like his peak in-game peak being higher than Jayson Tatum's is I agree with that, and I certainly think over the course of an 82 game season, you can expect more output from Jayson Tatum. I think that the reason I would take LeBron over Tatum, even at age 40, and I do think eventually we're going to see some decline from LeBron. I mean, obviously, eventually, it's just every year. Like if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I'd have been like, yeah. I mean, like the year that they lost to the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals, LeBron was down to like 20 points a game. He had that foot thing, went and had surgery. I thought this was going to kind of be the beginning of the end for LeBron. I thought he would come back this year. We'd be seeing like 18 points a game type LeBron. And then this year, 2024, would be his final season. That was kind of how I had mapped it out in my mind, how I thought it would happen. But then he came back last year and he was significantly better than he was the previous year. I mean, my thing with LeBron is Tatum's putting up about 1.5 more per game than LeBron is. I think some of that is owed to the volume of 3-point shooting that Tatum takes. But I also think, like, in that same respect, like, I think Tatum is best when he is attacking the rim.
Yes.
And I think if you cut out some of that damn 3-point shooting and attack the rim more, you would see an even larger bump in Tatum's scoring, because I think you would just find he's a more efficient scorer. Now, my thing with LeBron, there's 2 points I would make. One is that he almost doubles up Tatum on assists per game. Like LeBron is just, I mean, you can make a strong argument for LeBron being the best creator in NBA history. And I don't know whether he is the greatest or not, but he's certainly in the conversation. And I think you saw like his versatility and his ability to sort of take that. I thought like LeBron during the Olympics was a masterclass. Like it was a guy who was literally out there facilitating the offense, and anytime he saw the defense give him something, he took it. My thing would be that when you get to the playoffs, like, and it's weird saying this because the Celtics won the championship and the Lakers exited in the first round. But I think there are a lot of circumstances that, aren't owed to LeBron for that. I think that in-game peak for LeBron becomes much more important in a playoff situation. And I think the in-game peak for LeBron, and not just the in-game peak, I think his ability to completely control the game and play the point position in critical moments and organize the offense. And especially last year, where there was literally no organization whatsoever to the offense. And at times you have LeBron walking off the court, like just making sure the coaches know, like, I can play point guard if you need me to. like I'm LeBron James. If you haven't met me, this is what I can do. I'd be happy to step in and fill this role. But as far as where Tatum stands in the greater scheme of things, that second tier, remind me, you said Shai, Embiid, Tatum, and who?
I just had those three.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would take Shai over Tatum, and then after that, I'd take Shai over Embiid. I mean, Tatum over Embiid. Like, I like, my thing is like the difference between LeBron and Embiid is like, yeah, the in-game peak at this point in his career for Embiid is much higher than LeBron's. But like, I just can't rely on Embiid at all. Like, I can rely on Tatum.
Yeah. No,
and Tatum, I can rely on Tatum in more than one way. Like if Tatum shot it and falling, Tatum can adapt.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think also one of the weird things about Tatum is, he's only 26.
Yeah.
Like he has, I mean, we have another 8 years of high level Tatum play coming. And he's going to be one of those players who's going to have probably this discussion sort of surrounding them throughout his career. Because, I think if you're saying Tatum's ever going to win an MVP, I would bet on the no on that, just because I think that the odds of him being the best player of the league in any specific season, with like Wemby coming up and all that, are low. I think like if you're asking, but like I do think, somewhat paradoxically to that, I do think like I would bet in those next 8 years that he gets, at least 5 All NBA first teams, out of that. Like that wouldn't surprise me at all. And I
agree. I agree with that. Like, I think there's like a 3 to 4 year window where the MVP problem for him is Luka and Shai.
Yes.
Maybe Anthony Edwards, but I don't know. I probably not. I think it's Luka and Shai, and then I think and look, there's probably another year or so in there, couple years maybe, where Jokic is part of that problem.
Yeah.
And so like, and if Embiid, which I mean, everything coming out in the preseason is that the 76ers are already writing off the idea of Embiid playing enough games to compete for awards. And so like, but if Embiid strung together 65 games, he could be a problem for that award.
Yes.
But then like, once you get past like I think you're going to see some interesting battles for the MVP award between Luka and Wemby. And then, that's probably 3 to 4 years from now. Yeah. And then I think you're just going to see it become Wemby's league. And it's hard for him to win an MVP in that window either. And so, yeah, I agree with you on that. But like the idea of him making first team All NBA teams, like I don't see. I mean, I just don't see who's pushing him out of first team All NBA.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting into the sort of the question Of like, MVP can also just be, like who won the title in a certain year can be fully dependent on if, like, one year someone has a bad injury, and so they're taken out of the equation. Another player, their two supporting cast were hurt, so they're also out of the equation because their team wins only 40 games. Um, that's how you end up with random MVP winners in some cases, or like the narrative shifts against them. But I think I think it's interesting that I would I think with him the odds of him winning 3 titles are significantly higher than the odds of him winning an MVP. And I think that that's just a reflection both that he has how good Boston is, but also of the fact that how he plays and how he wants to play is he wants to play as part of a system rather than as the head of it, than necessarily the head of a system. He's not like gonna in end of games. He doesn't try to take over games as as much as like say a Kobe Bryant did. He's very willing to be the key cog as part of it, but he's gonna trust in the system rather than playing hero ball, and that sometimes does work to his disadvantage because you just don't have the moments where like Tatum single handedly dragged him back into the game, and stuff like that.
Well,
But
it's interesting because there's I think there's something that's pretty analogous from football. Like now, it's pretty much like recognized that Tom Brady is the GOAT.
yes,
But if you go back, you know, 9, 10 years, like, and you look at the discussions of who's the best quarterback in the league, there is a group of people who sort of value winning in that discussion above all else. And so they look at Peyton Manning and they say, well, he's not as good as Tom Brady because Tom Brady's beating him. And for that particular discussion, like I was always the guy who was like, well, I value, like we're not having a discussion about who's on the best team and who's the best quarterback on the best team. We're having a discussion about, who is the best quarterback, who's the best player at that position. And I look at everything that Peyton Manning did to sort of innovate the position. All that he was doing on the field is basically like a uniformed offensive coordinator. Like his ability to manipulate defenses before the ball's even snapped and so on and so forth. Like, and I just saw that, and then there were other people like Aaron Rodgers with arm talent and stuff like that you just looked at, and like it just seemed like this was a more nuanced, should be a more nuanced discussion than it was. I think Tatum's kind of in a similar situation where he's in a place that has a winning culture and that has built a winning team, and they're playing a particular style of basketball that's not designed to accentuate a particular person or their talents. It's designed to accumulate wins and championships. And I think there are I'm not accusing other teams of not being interested in that. I think that the Indianapolis Colts were supremely interested in that. Their theory of the case was, we're going to go out and get this quarterback and build this whole thing around him in a way that New England didn't approach it that way. And I don't think Boston approached it in that way. I think Boston approached it from the point of view of building a team. And yes, Tatum is the best player on that team, but it is about the team and the system and playing a particular style of basketball within that system. And everybody has to, commit themselves to that, and no one's bigger than that. Whereas in Dallas, Luka's the system.
yes,
In Denver, Jokic is the system.
yes.
In Philadelphia, sometimes it needs to be rebooted, or somebody's got to blow in the cartridge or whatever. But Embiid is the system,
100%.
and that's just not the case in Boston. And as a result,
he's not a central player. He's not the sun doesn't revolve around Tatum, and they're all in. like he's not the sun in Boston's offense is what I was trying to say. Like it is much more of a shared offense than it is one single, one sun and a bunch of players revolving around him.
Yeah. So we've got Luka versus Shai. We agree Luka's the better player.
Yep.
We've got the Wemby versus AD, and we're pretty evenly split on that discussion. Like, it was really hard for me to pick AD, which says a lot about how good Wemby is. You picked Wemby over AD. And both of us, just to be clear, so neither one of us sound like we're on peyote, we understand that we're talking about just this season. Like, we're not talking about building a team around for the future. That would clearly be Wemby. We had a brief discussion about best young big in the league, not named Wemby, and we agreed, like, Chet is the more talented player, but like when we're talking about a big or a center, Derek Lively actually does more within the role of that position to contribute to winning in Dallas than Chet does in Oklahoma City, right?
100%, yes.
And then we talked about Ja and Anthony Edwards, and sort of this. Oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped one. We talked about Jokic and Giannis, the two best players in the post KD Warriors era. And like, I think that one really was an interesting conversation because it highlights like how great Nikola Jokic really is. Because both of us admit we're talking about an all-time great player when we talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like he is one of the most, like, honestly, like, I'd say top 3 to 5 most dominant players in NBA history. Just a physically dominating presence. Like I can't think of anything, like, there's not a ton of stuff that would scare me about stepping on an NBA court. Like, if you told me I had to go out there and guard Giannis, that'd scare the shit out of me, man. Like, that'd honestly scare me. For my physical health. And with all that said, as great as Giannis is, like, for me, it wasn't hard to say I'd take Jokic over Giannis.
I agree. I think that we're talking about with Jokic a player who I think could end up being in a top 5 all-time great player. Like that's I think his ceiling. And I know it's sort of hard for people to comprehend, but what he does on the court and his impact, especially on the offensive end, is, I mean, it's truly amazing. We've never seen a center do anything like this. We just have never seen it, and we may never see it again. It is quite possible that you don't see another player that plays exactly like him at his size. With his touch, his vision, his combination of strength, skill, and everything like that. For another 30, 40 years.
I agree completely. And I think that like, he probably needs to win another championship to move into that discussion. Maybe 2 more, but
2 more, yeah.
Yeah. And then we talked about Ant and Ja. I think you took Ja in that discussion.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. What were your reasons again, real quick?
I think he's just a better playmaker. I think he makes his team better. I think it's a debate over playmaking versus defense, in comparison to then. And I think that the playoffs last year showed that Ant has a lot of work to do when defenses are going to start keying in and forcing him to start becoming a playmaker role. And I think that currently is lacking from his game.
I mean, it's impossible to disagree with that. I mean, Ja's without a doubt a better playmaker. I took Anthony Edwards over Ja. I like Anthony Edwards' size and strength. Both of them are like out of this world athletic. Both of them are out of this world exciting. I also like Anthony Edwards' shooting. I think his shooting is going to continue to get better. And I think he's going to be an elite two-way player. And then our last discussion, which we just wrapped up, was sort of a 2-part discussion. One, year 40 LeBron or 40-year-old LeBron versus 27-year-old Jayson Tatum. Who do you take? And you took Tatum. And what were your reasons?
The consistency on this point, and ability on the defensive end, and I think ability to play at the highest level consistently over an entire game. But I fully acknowledge that, as I mentioned before, LeBron, I think, has to sort of hibernate for a couple quarters, a game now. When he's locked in, if you're asking me who's the best player in a 12-minute stretch, it's LeBron. And
I think the craziest thing about LeBron is, you say best player in the NBA in a 12-minute stretch. LeBron's still in that damn conversation at year 40, 100%. At age 40. He's still that damn good. My thing with LeBron is, kind of what we were talking about the, fully tooled offensive weapon that Luka and Jokic is, with their vision, their passing and scoring ability. LeBron has all of that. And then when you talk about how physically dominant and athletic Giannis is, LeBron has all of that.
Yep.
And I agree with you that he sort of has to hibernate, especially within the context of a regular season. I don't think you see him hibernating much in the playoffs, but over the course of 82 games, game in, game out, he's certainly taking quarters off. But the thing about him taking quarters off is, he could still be out there, knocking down a lazy three. Or basically playing the point position and creating for others. And so, I went with LeBron. I think just the other thing too is the IQ and the guys' basketball IQ is just completely off the charts. And I think that compensates for so many things. And it's, I guess what makes it weird is he doesn't need a ton of compensation. But then that also led us into another discussion about where Tatum stacks up. And, I think we both agree there is a tier 1 in the NBA right now, which is Luka, Jokic, and Giannis. And then your tier 2, and I'd add one more player to that tier 2. Maybe it's fair to say he needs to show it to us for one more year, but he gets passed over because his game isn't as sexy as Ants and Jaws. Yeah. But your tier 2 was Embiid, Tatum, and Shai.
Yes.
A fourth player that I'd add, just to see how simpatico we are on this. Who do you think I'm thinking?
Brunson.
Yep. I don't put him over anybody in that tier yet. But if he does what he did for one more year and Embiid hobbles through one more season, I may drop Embiid completely out of that tier. But if not, I'm definitely moving Brunson ahead of him.
100%.
And if Anthony Edwards or Ja Morant or somebody comes back and plays deserving of being in that tier, I would be happy to ask Joel Embiid to pack his shit and get out of the tier to make room for them. But I think you have Tatum as number 1 in that tier and Shai is number 2 in that tier. And I just flipped those and we agree on everything else.
Yep. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think that's just sort of a matter of preference, honestly, about what you're valuing. Thank y'all for joining us. Went to wherever you're listening to the podcast, like, subscribe, give us 5-star rating. Thank you for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.